Hi. In this lesson, we'll be applying CSS styles to our components, imagining that our designer has already completed our service's unique design, and now we need to apply it to what we've developed. We won't be applying CSS in its raw form. We'll be using a CSS preprocessor. What should be noted before starting the work? This tutorial assumes that you already have some degree of proficiency in JavaScript and some experience with layout. Therefore, in this lesson, I'll mostly talk about CSS itself, about CSS modules, and some approaches specifically related to it. Nevertheless, I will briefly touch on layout and related approaches. But this lesson isn't about layout or how to do JavaScript as a whole, and I understand that some may lack these skills, while others may not possess these skills. In view of this, I have decided that I will also record 3 additional small courses that will be very cheap, or maybe even free. I'll decide later. In one, I will talk about JavaScript from scratch, to the extent necessary to create your own projects. I'll talk about layout from scratch and TypeScript too, covering its basic foundations sufficient for application. Nevertheless, all these skills can be acquired for free. There are plenty of textbooks on all these topics, and I recommend you refer to them. However, there's no point in memorizing information from these textbooks and not applying it. Okay? Regardless of your level, I recommend trying to create your own projects. It's one thing to learn how to arrange blocks in a row, just to do it, and another to learn, because if it's drawn like that in your design, you need to arrange these components like this for your project. It's a huge difference, and you will feel it. Here you go. Therefore, I recommend just trying to apply it. Specific questions will arise, but they can be Googled. ChatGPT helps. Stack Overflow helps. I also remind you that we have a group where you can join and create your products with us. Or, if you encounter insurmountable obstacles, you can contact me for a private consultation where we might resolve everything in just 20 minutes. All right, let's proceed directly to the SSNU. So, we need to install this very Sass. It's called Sass because it actually has 2 formats, Sass and CSS. We're only interested in CSS format. Let's get there. It will become clearer. The package we need is Sass. Right. We need to install it in web app. Okay. Installed. It's not installed. pnpmv install Sass. Okay. Let's start with some layout and try applying some styles. For this, let's create a file index.module.SCSS. Let's create it. Let's also get ready and create a folder named styles in the src folder. And within it, create a file, let's call it global.css. Creating 2 right away, because it's important for us to understand the difference between them. All right, let's try to add something to the global.scss file. If we look at the HTML structure of our project. So, elements, here. Everything is inside the body. There's a certain diff ID root here, where React renders our application. And here is our layout. This is our layout. It's not clear right away, but that's it. And here's our logo. Let's apply some styles to the body. Everything we want to apply to top-level components, such as the body, HTML, and other globals, we declare in the global.scss file. Suppose we want to paint the body blue. Let's do it like this. Obviously, it hasn't been applied yet because we haven't exported our global.scss anywhere. Let's export it. To export it globally, we need to do it in app.tstx because it's global. Let it be imported in the root. Styles, global.sss. So, now the body should ideally become blue. We missed it. We have it all in the styles folder. Yes, that's the folder. Uh-huh. Oh, perfect. Let's choose a lighter color. I don't know. Maybe RGB. Yes, you can make it light blue in the editor here, so it doesn't hurt our eyes. Yes, that's lighter. Good. This is how we applied global styles. And now, to understand global styles a bit better, I'll do one more thing. For example, I'll add any class name, and it will have color red. Yes, let's keep it simple too. Here's some kind of mildly pink. Here. This is a real class name, as we're used to seeing it, and we'll add it to something in apt.sex. Let's just add some div here, for example, with the text 1, 2, 3, and give it a class. In regular HTML, we are used to writing just class, but in React, you need to write class name. And then it will all be passed to the actual class attribute. And that's it. Class name is a regular string. Any class name. So, what should happen now? We should see pink color on text 1, 2, 3. And we broke everything. What does the console tell us? That root list can't contain this. All right, fine. Let's place it somewhere on another page. All IDs. Okay, any class name, 1, 2, 3. All IDs. And here we see our text, colored in our colors. Here, we inspect this element and see that its class is exactly as we named it. But we will never do it this way again. So, global styles, yes, we will declare them for the body in global.css. But if you have done any styling, you have probably encountered the problem where, for example, you have a component with a class title in one component, and another with a class title in another component, and they should have different styles. But since they have the same class, they overlap, and you have to deal with this. Well, most often by adding some prefixes that this is the title of this component, and that is the title of that component. Yes, and around this, there is the whole BEM approach from Yandex. But this is all overhead when you can use CSS modules. Let's try to do this. All done. We have defined global.css. We have some kind of body here for now. Now let's look at module CSS. How it will look. It works like this. Let's assign some class here. Oops. Well, point oops. Yes, what kind of point? Let's apply something to the logo. Yes, awesome. Well, and we could write like this, right? Well, let's do it. Making point logo. Point logo and color. Well, some kind of green. Yeah, just played around a bit. This is the green we'll have, okay? And now, let's import it. I'll show you. It won't work like this, but it'll become clear. Import CSS from .index modules, SCSS. And right away, I'll also console log this CSS. Look. So, the class name is there. It's described here, and it seems we even imported the file. Save. Look at our logo, but it's not green. All right? Now, let's look at the console. We have an object with CSS. Here, we have an object where the key is all the existing, let's say, classes, and the value is the class that will actually be applied. You should apply it as follows. We write class name and pass a string here, but through the css.logo variable. We wrote it like this. Save it. Now our logo is the desired color. Check the elements. And we see it has some awkward class. But thanks to this, if we imported this CSS module into another file, or if we used a class with the same logo name in another component, they would never conflict. And thanks to this, we can worry about class names only within each individual small component. And therefore, We will always write styles exclusively for the class, each separate component, and embed them into CSS modules and use them there. Then, what should be said next? About the layout in general. We can look at the body and see that it has some margins, these default indents. In general, it's some kind of browser arbitrariness. They all have their own standard values, and it is inconvenient to account for which browser has which indents, which default style for H1, which default style for H2. And for this, I suggest using the so-called reset CSS. What is reset CSS? Reset CSS is simply a set of CSS components, CSS styles, that just reset everything to some default value. Let's install this lib, reset CSS. Okay? And reset CSS. Good. We don't need it here anymore. And go to global. We'll apply it. Import it as follows. Is it there? It is there. Good. Imported. And as you can see, all styles have been reset. Everything became without indents, sizes, etc. Well, that's good for us. Why default when we can set all the necessary styles ourselves? Great. Styles have been reset. Done. Wrapped up. And now let's talk about variables. When your designer creates a design in Figma, they usually have color variables and possibly some spacing variables. And it's logical for you to transfer all these fixed CSS variables into your project before you start coding. To do this, let's create a file vars.css and write in it the variables that we will use. All right, let's go. New file. I also recommend sticking to conventions. We'll name any imported files with an underscore. vars.css. So let's define some useful variables for ourselves. We generally take them from the design, but I'll just insert these for now. Let's say I need these colors. I'll define a default font size, default background, default text color, and default line height. Now let's apply some of these variables to our global.css file, also included in explaining what I have here. First of all, I can import without specifying the underscore. Will be understood anyway. Well, something broke? All right, let's add the underscore. Fine. Used to work before. Maybe some file paths weren't loaded. Code editors also have bugs, and teachers sometimes mess up. All right? Look, all I want to set is that our HTML, body, and root, which are 3 nested components, have a minimum height of 100%. It might seem redundant, but in practice, I don't remember exactly. There are some corner cases where it works better this way. We'll cover this separately in layout courses. That's not the point right now. The point is that we used variables here. We import this file, and now we have these variables accessible. If you press Command and click on them, you can navigate to them. It's convenient. Speaking of preprocessors, technically instead of Sass with CSS, you could use PostCSS, and that's kind of cool. PostCSS allows you to create your own custom preprocessor. There are countless plugins available. In principle, you could achieve the same with CSS using PostCSS. But PostCSS has slightly worse support in code editors, and you have to set up a lot of things yourself. And that's why I think it's simply redundant. With CSS, everything is already available, and I believe we should use it. And you also have an alternative in the modern world to use Tailwind CSS. It allows you to write styles, in the format of class names. And here are just some short letters like PD1, meaning padding 1 or F012, well, something like that. That would be font size 12. And right now, Many people are thrilled with this Tailwind CSS, but I think it's all nonsense. But no one stops you from using it. I think it's not right. It's logical that it appeared. Logical that it exists. Logical that some people like it, but not me. I think it's not as convenient as using plain CSS. All right, but it's your choice. You can use Tailwind, please. All right, let's return to our global.css file. We've also set everything to border box and removed the underline from all links. All right, well, variables are something like a unit. That is, it's one value. Here's font size for you. And there's also the concept of mixins. It's a set of some CSS properties that can be applied to various other CSS elements. Let's create a file with mixins that we will also reuse. So, I suggest we create the following mixins. Also, a new file mixins.ss, and the content will be the following. Let's also import our variables. Let's go through it. So these are the two simple mixins. So we have a mixin h1 that specifies that where we apply it, we'll have a font size of 30 pixels, font weight bold, and margin bottom 20 pixels. All right. Now let's try applying it somewhere and see what comes out of it. Let's apply it to the layout, and suppose we want our logo to be h1. But for this, of course, we also need to import our CSS styles again. Let's import them as well. I generally recommend that when you create a new CSS module, import the vars and mixins immediately, even if they're not used here, because you might need them later. There, just create a file, import immediately, and start coding. Let's save and see how it looks. That's it. The h1 styles applied to it, and we did it with one command. It's convenient when we plan to reuse these styles later. The same goes for h2. These are mixins without input parameters. They simply output this statically. So, let's say we have a mixin for a link. Here, color is a variable that will be used inside. And hover color is a variable that will also be used inside. And red and blue are default values. But here I made a mistake, and it makes sense, of course, that we need to use it like this. Accordingly, we can do the following. Let's go back to the layout and give the link some properties. CSS, well, link, for example. Like this? Good. And let's see what happens if we apply the link mixin to it. So link, include link. Let's see. Our link is now blue and red on hover. At the same time, nothing stops us from changing these values by passing in some other colors. Save. And now, the link is purple-green. There. These mixins are logically created as you see recurring styles appearing. Here. And you want to wrap them in some mixins. There are also some mixins provided by other libraries. For example, I suggest installing a library that conveniently allows you to work with screen width. Here, provides a nicer syntax for writing styles that define how something will look on a wide screen or a narrow screen. For this, let's install a library called include media. pnpm install. Yes, web app install include media. Include media. Installed. Now we need to import it, but where? I suggest importing it into our mixins file. So everywhere we import our mixins, this mixin with include media is also automatically imported. So, to show how to use it, we need to style something where the screen width matters. Therefore, I propose to start with styling the layout now. So, let me just show you how I suggest styling it. And we will apply our styles to it and break them down a bit. So, here, this will be our HTML. What's the idea? That our entire layout is wrapped in a layout. Next, we have some navigation. And in the navigation, we've got a logo menu. The menu has an item. Each item is a link, and that's it. And there is content. But I want the navigation to be at the top of the screen on desktop and on mobile, or rather the opposite, on mobile at the top and on desktop on the side. This is where include media comes in. Now let's take our CSS styles and apply them to the layout as well. So look, we can set some variable right at the CSS modules level if we don't want to set it globally. So this variable seems to only pertain to the layout. Let it be here for now. If you ever need it elsewhere, you can just move it to vars. All right, let's take a quick look at the style. What's our layout? It's display flex. We're saying everything should be in a row. And its height is 100%. There you go. But if the screen is less than or equal to 9900 pixels, then it should stack as a column. For navigation, we also have an override, changing height from 100% to auto. Earlier, the border was on the right, now it's on the bottom. Let's take a look to better understand what we've been trying to lay out here. So, here we see our line, and here we see our menu. Move the screen, and when it becomes less than 900 pixels, everything will rearrange. 1. And we have a mobile version ready. That's why include media helps us. What else is important to say about CSS? And its main difference from CSS is that it allows you to write styles within each other, making the nesting clear. You need to understand that if we add some navigation inside the layout, it's the same as writing like this in CSS. Navigation here. And thanks to this, many codes can be avoided from duplication, because we can just nest everything inside each other. Regarding the approach to styling, what do I usually do? I go to each HTML element and assign some CSS style. And it shouldn't reflect, let's say, the design. It should reflect the semantics. Whether it's layout, it's all about layout. This is navigation, this is logo, this is menu. You shouldn't write something like a border for the menu or anything like that. So just name things according to what they are. Okay? After you've named them all, I usually do this. I just highlight everything I've written here. And then I go to the CSS file and paste it like this. Highlight. And next, I just arrange things into each other as they should be there. That is, then I literally do the following. Here. And I start writing styles. Right in these places. This is a convenient and understandable practice. So first you name things, then you set their structure in CSS, and then you describe how they should look. That's all. This is the approach to styling. What else should be mentioned about CSS in this lesson? Yes, I think I covered the main points. As for how to do layout, well, that's really a separate discussion. Layout is a whole world, but not that big. Understanding layout comes with practice. I attached some links to layout documentation and other resources, and hopefully soon my course on layout will be released, where I will explain all of this in more detail. Or maybe it's already out. Who knows when you're watching this video? Well, that's pretty much everything for the content part. Nevertheless, I'll still add styles to all the other components so you can continue working with them. Actually, you can skip this part, or you can stay with me and take a look at other styles. Okay, let's do it. We need to add some styles for all IDs. So, all IDSP. All HTML will have this. Like this. Need to create index module file with CSS and add styles there. The styles are the following. Okay, good. Like this. They need to be imported as well. CSS, yes. All IDSP. All. Look, how beautiful. Good. Links are red. Links are blue. Okay, now we need to style this page. Let's use the same technology. We'll take their code. New ID, page. Okay. Import CSS. Create file, index module, a CSS, and copy its content. Okay. Let's see. Also acceptable. Good. So, global styles added, variables added, mixins added, in layout style added, in API ESX style added. All done. The application looks pretty decent now. We can move on. Thanks, everyone.